Vilkommen, backensplat. What's the chord I'm looking for there? Whoops. Ah. Ah. Hang on, I gotta get what's in my head out here. That's not the chord. Ah. What's this? Love the grooves. Right on, dude. I just started. I'm trying to get this idea. I'm trying to capture the idea. I think it's. That was really enjoyable. That was quite fun. Yes, indeed. All right. I don't know if I want to just go straight into funk all day, because I'll do that and then I won't come back. So I kind of want to do some. Right. Well, I'm gonna do thoughts on 30 because it's the 30 and therefore thoughts. There's kind of an anecdote that goes before what I wanted to talk about because I think the anecdote is a brilliant illustration of this occurring. So I'm a TA at Mines. I TA general chemistry, which means I teach 2 labs in the week. I grade 50 people's homeworks every week. That's kind of annoying. But I also proctor exams. And so on Thursday this week, 2 days ago, there was an exam. And so Gen Chem has over 1,200 students in it. You know, everyone at the school has to take it. There's like 5,000 undergrads at the school, and you know that means like 1,200 freshmen roughly are in the Gen Chem, which means 1,200 people taking this exam. And so the exam was from 7:30 to 9 o'clock p.m. I'm not sure if that matters. Yeah, it kind of matters. Basically, it was cold, it was dark, and it was snowy, as it has been on Thursday in Colorado here this week. And so what happened though was, so I TA this exam, and I pack all this stuff up, and I'm bringing it back to the building with the office in it. I proctored it in a different building. I'm bringing it back to the office, and outside the building, I see off in the distance, I see another proctor with their bin of stuff, and actually it was a cart, a hand truck with like 2 big boxes of these huge exams. Not that actually matters, but I see that off in the distance, and they're kind of hurrying inside, and I wouldn't call it a hallucination. I would call it more of a vision or like symbolic something or other. What happened was I just totally began to perceive a different reality. I guess that would be the definition of hallucination. I don't know. I began to perceive it the daytime, and I pictured all the students with their exams, rushing around the campus, some holding them up like, yeah, I did so well, others kind of distraught because they didn't do so well, and daytime, even though it was the building is like just on a road, it's just a one-sided thing, but for some reason I pictured like a courtyard with columns and stuff, and a lush green summery feel to it, nice and warm even though it was like 20 degrees out, nice and light, daytime sunshine even though it was like 9 p.m. And perfectly dark out. And so this image sort of replaced the reality, or not even replaced it. It was more, it just very, very vividly appeared in my mind. I was still here and now, but I wasn't unaware of myself or the place I was. But I just saw it symbolically, though, is kind of the point, though. I saw the symbols associated with students at a college taking an exam, and it was very exciting because I imagined 1,200 students getting their exams back, and some being so excited and some being so disappointed, but all of them have this new energy that wasn't there before, this new emotion that wasn't there before as a result of this experience. And because of that, I was very grateful and I was very happy, even for the students that didn't do well at all, because to have experienced something is better than to have not experienced anything, even if the experience is terrible. And I will live by that until the day I die, So even if someone didn't do well on an exam and was like really disappointed, that they have this information now, they are still in control of their life, they're still the one making all their choices, and they're going to go on and use that information however they will, and I will defend their right to do that till the day that they die. They make their own choices. Every individual makes their own choices. And so what I very briefly wanted to talk about, so this is the symbolic world, right? So you kind of almost remove yourself from the situation, just observe it. What is the situation like? And you can do this with any situation, any object. The reason being that we live in a physical world as what we perceive as an individual subject, but in a very intersubjective world. And so all the objective stuff, all the objects, we only perceive them in that intersubjective space. We can't perceive the true form of, say, an object. Is my red your red? We'll never know. But we both perceive the intersubjective experience of red, and then that too becomes defined by our subjectivity. Sorry, that was very abstract. Basically, every person is experiencing their own unique reality embedded within this objective reality. And so the embedding is through symbols. So for example, I perceive a guitar like so, right? And perhaps we see the same guitar, you and I, or perhaps we don't. But both of us perceive it as a guitar, and so that is the intersection of our realities. We could both agree that this is a guitar, this is an amp, and so on and so forth. Now, this is a big thing in sociology, of course. Reality begins to break down when we can't agree. So if I hold up a guitar, and you're like, no, that's a hot dog, then what am I to do? Am I to eat the hot dog, or am I to play the guitar? Or perhaps perhaps to me I am playing the guitar, but to you I'm eating a hot dog. And at that point we can't agree on what is real and what isn't. And it turns out that all experiences actually have this nature, that I could never prove what you're experiencing, nor could you prove what I am. Which is kind of crazy if you think about it, because it just points out how much everyone is in their own individual world, and it's kind of weird to think about. The other thing I briefly wanted to touch on, I think that's all I wanted to touch on with that, but I think there was one other thing. Give me 1 sec. 1 second. I have to remember things. Well, yeah. Yes. Before I finish that point, so this replacement of the subjective actual world, or whatever, the world that I was experiencing, I should say, the replacement of that by the symbols associated with it is what happened when I had this kind of vision the other night. I was perceiving not how I perceive students at a school backing up. I wasn't perceiving what was the here and now reality of the situation, right? Because I was standing on a cold sidewalk in the dark, snow everywhere, but what I was thinking about was the symbols of the place, the symbols of the action, the symbols of students taking a test. And so those symbols that are in my mind that I see, I kind of described it again as like a courtyard, lush, four-sided, even though it wasn't. Some students really happy, like waving exams around, running around and stuff. Others kind of sad. Those are the symbols I associate with this action, regardless of whether or not it's actually happening. And so it's, in that case, it was very comforting because, in that case, it was very comforting because I, um, totally took myself out of it and was just like, everyone is learning. Yes, this is a teaching experience, is what it was, and that was very enjoyable because everyone was learning from it. And I think you could say that about most experiences. The fact that something happens rather than something not happening sets off a chain of events, even if they're very, very small. It sets off a very long chain of very subtle events in some cases that lead to people learning things and that lead to people growing. Growing is really the key thing here. People growing as people gaining wisdom and knowledge. From an individual experience, it might be very small, but the long-term effects can be very large. And I think the reason that I hold this view, just to be completely honest and personal and whatever, is because for so many years I lived with like pretty bad depression, and so I went through this experience and somehow came out the other side with this really large motivation to not let myself fall into those thought patterns again, and it's not a said and done thing, right? People who struggle with mental illness or really anything tend to struggle with it, every day. It's not that you have gotten rid of depression. It's that the thoughts can come and just pass through without you saying, stop, I'm going to dote on this thought for a second. It's a clearing of the mind, essentially. I hope I phrased that okay. I don't really know if I did. But no, so I lived all those years with like really bad depression, and on the other side, I was very determined to not let myself fall into those addictive thought patterns, repetitive, habitual thought patterns that are kind of what was causing me the depression in the first place, right? Like a thought would pop up, oh, I'm such a piece of crap, whatever, that sort of thing. And it would get stuck in my head, and I would become that thought for however many minutes or seconds or hours or days, months in some cases, and that's why I was depressed. Whereas eventually I noticed this process was happening and said, oh, there's a thought, let it out, let it through. Don't get stuck on it, that's the key to changing your mindset, in my opinion at least. And I achieved that through years of meditation at this point, and healthier living, sobriety is really important for me. Just attentiveness in every moment really adds up. But yeah, sorry, that was quite tangential, I think. Yeah, I forget what the point was there in relation to symbols and... Oh, right, so growth. Yeah, so people grow from even the tiniest bit of information. The fact that something happens rather than nothing means people grow. And so it actually turns out that the event itself and the piece of information doesn't really matter because it's intersubjective. It's defined by how we've lived all our years and seen people reflecting it back at us. So, for example, you have some definition in your mind of what is funny, for example, and say someone says something and your brain processes it and says, okay, that was funny, haha, whatever. But what if someone says something that you're not really sure if it's funny? You're trying to figure it out. You don't really have a way to figure it out, right? Because you don't have like a list that you can say, yes, checks this box, therefore funny. You don't have that, no. So by experiencing something that you've never experienced before, you have the opportunity to assimilate that new information into your long list, your computer-like protocol in the brain that determines if something is funny or not. But again, what actually is said doesn't actually matter because so much of this process is related to how it makes you feel spontaneously. I think it was Sartre that called it a visceral reaction. It's before the processing that the reaction actually takes place. That's a really important point because the processing itself is therefore some sort of reflection of the actual initial reaction. Okay, I think that's all I wanted to say. I got really abstract and kind of strange there, so I'm probably just talking gibberish now at this point anyway, which means I would rather play gibberish than talk gibberish. Sorry, I need a little bit of water. Stay hydrated out there. Today's episode of Saturday Jam Series provided to you by water. Thanks, water. You know, we don't give water enough credit for all it does for us. Did you know over 70% of your body is H2O? In my case, it's H2 bro. Nah, just kidding. I'm more of a nerd than that. I'm not so broy, as far as I know. I kind of want to give 2 minutes of just free thought. So there's this book I'm reading. It's called Flow. It's all about flow states, as you might imagine. It's a nonfiction collection of psychological research by this guy Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi. And so, his question is, why do people experience flow states? Why do people enjoy flow states? Which is kind of a big part of it. But, one characteristic of a flow state, though, is just that you're in the flow to the extent that you kind of let go of what you thought you knew, and then that pushes you to open the door to learning new things and to trying new things, especially. And so I think that's why I love playing guitar so much. And in that thing that I just played, like, most of what I was doing there is not really anything that I've practiced technique-wise, so that's kind of cool. It's opening the door to the next stage of learning how to play the guitar, I guess. This always happens to me. It's like, I play, and some days I'm at my best, and when I'm at my best, I play nothing familiar at all to me. Just learning new things. And then, over the coming months, I master those things. Those become the normal. I start doing them all the time. And then there's new things that pop up for me to learn. So it's this never-ending process of learning that I enjoy. Big stuff. That's quite a compliment. Go, be inspired. Go do your own art. That's my goal here. It's not about me. But I appreciate that. I would like to inspire, absolutely. That's kind of the point. That's why it's not about me. super clean. Yeah, dude. Do it. Make that content. Make it. Make it. They call it playing for a reason, you know? Not trying to push it. This is really fun though. I'm feeling in the zone. One thing I noticed there was I had my volume so high that it made me more anxious to make mistakes. Granted, there wasn't really a good way I could have done that, because I could have played hard, not worrying about making mistakes, in which case it would just hurt everyone's ears. I don't know if it comes through on there badly, but it would have hurt my ears. Or I tried to kind of quiet it down and like slow down my hands a little bit, and because I messed up a bit. The anxiety of worrying will mess you up, so don't worry. Don't worry about it, man. 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 Don't worry about it, man.
about it, man. This has been an enjoyable guitar experience brought to you by water. Thanks, water. Thanks for tuning in. See you next week. Be well, be inspired, go make art, do your thing. I hope you enjoy it. That's the idea. All right, see you later.